So spelling analysis. And we're going to focus right now on one-syllable words today. Tomorrow, we will do two-syllable words, and we will talk about schwa. So tomorrow, we're going to dig into more complicated words. But today, we're going to stick with one-syllable words. So spelling analysis is a systematic process for learning how words are read and spelled and analyzing why they're spelled that way. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to be the teacher for 10 new words for you. These are really strange vocabulary words, so you're probably not going to know how to spell them because I want you to experience this like your students would. So you might learn some new vocabulary today. I had a great deal of fun searching out obsolete words. So I'll be curious if you put any of these into your vocabulary.
So they really are words. They're not nonsense words.
They're not nonsense words. These are really obscure words. And there's websites out there that were really fun about words that we should bring back into English. So some of them are these. So you'll learn some new vocabulary. But I want you to experience the first several like your students will. And I chose these words because you probably won't know how to spell them. So that's intentional. Then after word 5, I believe it is, or someplace in there, I will stop and we're going to talk about the process as we go through the words. So you are going to either need a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, or you may use a whiteboard, whichever you would prefer. And you can close the rest of your books and everything else for now. I just want you to be a student in the classroom experiencing being taught spelling words. And just to set the context, again, you've learned some phonograms, you've got phonemic awareness. Now you're going to use those skills to learn some new words. So the first word is fleer. Rachel felt ashamed when her friends began to fleer. Don't write anything yet, just keep your pencils down. Fleer. Go ahead and sound out fleer. Use E-double-E. Go ahead and write fleer. And as you write it, sound it out, please. Great. All right, go ahead and sound it out, and as you sound it out, I will write it. All right, and here's how we're going to mark it. We're going to underline the E-double-E. This will help us learn that those two letters work together to say E. All right, and let's go ahead and read it. Fleer, fleer. Very good. By the way, what does fleer mean?
To make fun of.
All right. This is one of my favorite new words. I'm actually starting to use this one. Groaks. Groaks. The dog groaks whenever Sarah sits on the ground with her lunch. Groaks. Let's sound out groaks. Two-letter O that you may not use at the end of English words. K. Use tall K. Groaks. Go ahead, sound it out as you write it. Two-letter O that you may not use at the end of English words. And then go ahead and help me write it. And how will we mark it? Underline we'll use the sounds. O. And let's go ahead and read it. G-R-O-K-S. Groaks. What does groaks mean? Yeah, actually it's even more specific. To sit silently watching someone eat while hoping to be invited to join them. I'm serious, my dogs groak. Isn't it a great word?
It's very specific, but you don't mark that vowel.
No, you don't need to mark that. The next word is cam. Cam. The clock has so much cam, it is difficult to read the time. Cam. Let's sound it out. Use tall k. Go ahead and write cam. And then go ahead and help me write it. K, a, m. And is there anything to mark? No? So let's read it. K, a, m, cam. Notice I had to differentiate k and tall k here. Oh, what does cam mean? Distorted. The next word is cobs. Cobs live in the grasslands of western Uganda. Cobs. Let's go ahead and sound it out. Use tall k. Go ahead and write cobs. And as you write it, be sure to sound it out. I want to hear you. Good. And now help me write it. K, a, b, s. Let's sound it out. K, a, b, s. Cobs. What's a cob? It's this animal. All right. So let's talk through this process. In your teacher's manuals, you'll always have the word and a sentence, and then you'll have the spelling hints. So the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to say the word. Then you're going to read the sentence and repeat the word. So let's go ahead and do that with this. The next word is K. We took kayaks out to the K and spent the day on the beach. K. Then the students will say the word. Go ahead. K. So here we go. Then the students will segment the word. Use k, s, a, two-letter A that you may use at the end of English words. And as they segment it, the teacher will fingerspell and cue the phonograms. Then the students write the words, so go ahead and do that. And then you're going to help me write it. K, a. How will we mark K? Underline the A. And then this is how we analyze the spelling. So I'll ask you, how do we mark it? The students will be telling you how to mark it. They're the ones doing the work of analyzing the spelling. Then the students will sound it out, K, A, K, and blend it into a new word. So that is the process for a one-syllable word. Let's go ahead. We're going to do this for just a few more, just to get the feel. The next word is glede. Oh, by the way, what is a K? It's an island in the Caribbean. All right, the next word is glede. When cooking over an open fire, it is best to wait for the glede. Go ahead. Glede. Let's sound it out. Use E-double-E. Go ahead and write it. And go ahead and help me write it. G-O-E-D. And how will we mark it? Underline the E-double-E. Very good. You can use either the sound or the sound in the whole thing. And with E-double-E, I mean, it sounds like the name, but it's also that spelling hint that's on the back. So like with K, if they say underline A that you may use at the end of English words, fine. If they say underline the A, that's fine. But not the AY, not letter names, because letter names, once again, don't help us to know why it's spelled that way. And you can see how many repetitions spelling analysis builds in with those words, and also how it's teaching them independence, because this is what you need to do when you're spelling a word. Oh, what does glede mean? Embers, yeah, the hot coals. Okay, The next word is scud. Scud. Lindsay pulled her jacket tightly around her in the cold scud. Scud. Go ahead. Yep, say it. Go ahead, say it, scud. And then let's sound it out. Use k, s. Go ahead and write scud. All right, help me to write it. S, k, d. Anything to mark? No? Let's sound it out. S, k, d, scud. And what does a scud mean? A gust of wind. The next word is skeg. The skeg, located at the back of the surfboard, helps to improve stability. Skeg. Let's sound it out. Use talk. And go ahead and help me write it. Skeg. Anything to mark? No? Let's sound it out. Skeg. Skeg. And you noticed I needed to cue the talk because otherwise you might have wrote it with this. What is a skeg? Yeah, that fin, that piece of the board. Okay, the last one is straight. Straight. Miss Lunn is frightfully straight. Okay, what is it? Straight. Let's sound it out. Two-letter A that you may not use at the end of English words. Help me to write it. And how do we mark it? Two-letter A. Underline the A, two-letter A. Let's go ahead and read it. Straight. And what does straight spelled like this mean? Strict and rigorous. All right, so what are the benefits of spelling analysis? Your example of versus a is really good because you'll notice that many students misspell vowels because they're not hearing the vowel clearly. And it's interesting because they'll say the vowel clearly, so they actually are hearing it in speech fine, but they don't think they're hearing it clearly, so they don't have well-developed skills for differentiating those sounds for spelling. They have them for speech, and you can point it out when you compare minimal pairs, and they'll be like, oh yeah, bed and bid. Okay, once again, in the South this is a little different, but you get the idea, or bad and bed. You can hear those clearly, but developing those skills for spelling is another depth of learning because we haven't done that. And so this really helps students to hear clearly the phonemes in English. Okay? It's also very multi-sensory. You'll notice something that I think is really important to realize is that this is a very different way of teaching reading and spelling than we're usually taught because typically we start with the visual. But here we are starting with the sounds, the auditory. And actually, written language is actually imitating speech, isn't it? So we're starting with the speech, which is the original, and then we are breaking those into those sounds using our speech learning mode and our phonemic awareness skills. Then what are we doing? We're writing it, which is what sort of experience? That's a kinesthetic experience of this word. And when do you see the word for the first time? In your own handwriting is the first time you see it. Then you do it again. You go back to the sounds. You see it as your teacher writes it. You see how those sounds connect again. So very multisensory. In a little bit, we're going to do after we practice teach this, we're going to come back together and do something on the neuroscience and reading in the brain and how we learn to read from a neuroscience perspective. And I want you to be thinking about those steps as we watch this very short presentation about that, because it's really key. It's also practicing the skills, those foundational skills of reading. Where is the phonemic awareness component? Segmenting and then blending them back together, those are phonemic awareness. Where's the systematic phonics component? Writing it. And when you write it, you need to use the phonograms. Eventually, you're going to need to use the spelling rules that you're learning, so you are applying it. Do you also see you're using your critical thinking skills? It's not just rote memory. You're applying knowledge now. Where does word level fluency come in? What? Yeah, when you're blending it. And even when you're writing it, it might seem strange to us, but writing that word is developing fluency even in reading, but also in writing. And one of the things we often see is kids doing essentials and foundations, their reading and their writing skills are coming up simultaneously, where sometimes you see reading skills coming up much faster than writing skills. So you see this coming up together, and as you're remediating students, you see these coming up much more closely too, because they're not taught separately. Where do you see vocabulary? The words. Yeah, the words. Yeah, and as you choose those, or as the curriculum introduces these words, you might be learning new vocabulary. This also comes out then in the lessons where you'll be using these words to add suffixes, prefixes. In the new essentials, there's Latin and Greek roots that'll come out through this process. It also builds independence. How? Taught well, this builds independence. So how does it do that? Yeah, and these are the tools also to use spell check really well. They really are.
You're never telling them the letter names.
No, so it's a very, very powerful process of building independence. I want to, at this point, just throw out a question. So as I went around looking at your definitions of sight words, I saw that already, early in this presentation or early in this workshop, you are already playing with this from the cultural definition, because sight words are usually words you can't sound out. But there were definitions, words that can be read by sight without being sounded out, and then lists of high frequency words. Are kids who are fluent sounding out most words? Doesn't that make all words sight words?
Well, you said that again.
Okay. Some of you followed me. I saw it in your eyes. So many of you wrote a definition for sight words that said words that can be read by sight without being sounded out. So you mean kind of instantaneously fluent. And then you wrote lists of high frequency words. But when students are fluent, don't they read all words on the page or most of the words on the page by sight?
So all words are sight words.
That's what I'm wondering. And then how does this build all words into becoming fluent words that are read quickly? And we're not going to discuss that yet, but I'm throwing this question out because, again, when we go to this cognitive neuroscience documentary, I think it's going to provide some insight, and I want you to be thinking about that in terms of spelling analysis and what you're experiencing. And by the way, could you read scud as a sight word now? I mean, you could have before too. Yeah, and it's better to teach lots of words through spelling analysis, because if you stop and think about this again, we really want students, think about those 6-year-old students, 10,000 words in their vocabulary. So that we would like them to be able to spell all the words in their vocabulary. Are you going to really teach 10,000 words in first grade? Not at all. This way you're teaching the tools. Now, you will notice in foundations there's a heavy emphasis on high frequency words because if you misspell have, you look a little silly. So it practices some of those words very intentionally, but you can apply those to anything. Let's do a few of the silent E rules that we learned through spelling analysis, so I'll show you how those are marked. But you're going to see these come up early in Foundations B. So let's do have. I have a house. Have. All right? Have. Silent final E. So you'll just cue it. Or I could go, oh, this ended in ooh, what do I need to add? And they'll start whispering. And the kids already, once they learn these rules, they already start identifying that it needs to be there. Go ahead and write it. As you write it, sound it out. And then go ahead and help me write it. Silent final E. And we'll underline the E twice. A double underline in Logic of English means it's silent. And we always, whenever we have a silent final E, ask them, why is the E there? Why is it there? English words do not end in V or U. And that's the silent E rule is English words don't end in V or U. Let's do large. That is a very large apple. These are silly sentences. Go ahead. Large. Let's send it out. Use G, J, silent final E. Go ahead and write large. And help me to write it. O, R, J, silent final E. How will we mark it? And double underline the E because it's silent. Underline the R. Why do we have a silent final E in large? Oh, I didn't teach you this. Can you figure it out? It's related to the C softens to S. G softens also before E, I, and Y. Sarah takes voice lessons. Voice. Go ahead and sound it out. Oh, what? Go ahead. I know, I'm sorry, I didn't teach it. I just was pulling them off the top of my head. It is in your cards. Yep, it's in your cards. G may soften to J before an E, I, or Y. And the second or the third reason for a silent E would be the C says and the G says J because of the E. So without it, it would say larg. So I'm sorry that I pulled one out of sequence. Let's do voice. Oi that you may not use at the end of English words. Use k. Go ahead and write it. And then help me to write it. Oi, silent final E. How would we mark voice? Underline the oi. And why do we have a silent final E in voice? Good. What would it say without it? Voik. Yeah, you could put a 2 over it too. I've gone back and forth about this. So I think what we're doing now is to put a 2 over it when it says its second sound. Okay, so just a few tips for spelling analysis. And I think you caught this. Provide hints for phonograms with multiple sounds. And we did that in finger spelling. And only provide help for the students when they need it. Really foster independence.